Welcome to another edition of the Undiscovered Decade. This is a podcast where we go over the films of the 1990s. We're all the way into June 1991, and it's a particularly special film for me. It was the first film I ever saw in theaters. That would be The Rocketeer. This will also help for the audio later when I show this is how much I love this film.
What?
He's got it tattooed on his arm.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting
So-
about that.
Hardcore. Like.
Oxidization and everything on the helmet.
Yeah. I'll put a picture on so you can see this better for especially the people that are just listening. This was the first thing I saw in theaters, and I guess, yeah, it's impacted my life probably as much as any of my other favorite films, like Jurassic Park or anything. So it made me want to pursue cinema because of how fascinating it was to see a man fly on such a large screen and everything, all the stunt pilot work and all the snappy dialogue and everything. But came out on June 24th, 91, and stars a relatively unknown Billy Campbell as a stunt pilot that does shows for John Polito in the 1930s. It's November 1938. So the war is coming, but they're off in California. So that's not really in the back of their minds yet. He dates a young college student played by Jennifer Connelly. And then he accidentally discovers a test rocket pack that Howard Hughes had developed and decides to try it out and becomes the Rocketeer. So we can go into more detail about like how that happens and what else happens there. But
It's Iron Man meets Indiana Jones.
yeah,
Meets Captain America.
Captain
Meets
America.
the great Waldo Pepper.
yeah. This is important that he mentioned Captain America because Joe Johnston was the director of this. This is his second feature film after Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but this film is why he got the job to do Captain America, because then it has the same flair.
Yeah. And he, had the experience of dealing with like a poppy 1940s culture, except, 1938 instead of proper 1940s.
Just the whole pulp feel of that era, just to get the, not just comic books, but those periodicals that they would flip through, the serials that they would have on the screen themselves, that at one point Jennifer Connelly and Billy Campbell go to the movies. They're essentially watching a film that could have starred the two of them back in the 30s. So a little meta. The screenwriters had originally planned to do something that was akin to a serial that actually, I forget the name. I meant to write this down, but it looks like The Rocketeer back in the day. It's a little bit of what the comic creator Dave Stevens had intended it to look like. He was trying to make it off of the serials of the 30s. And so they were going to release it maybe black and white, or their original draft had it like black and white. It's going to be in a serial format, chapter wise, and get that like almost like Grindhouse did for the Grindhouse era. Get the feel of 30s serials.
I would imagine like Flash Gordon would be
That's
good example.
It didn't say that's the exact example, but if for our listeners, that's essentially the idea.
Because like in the 30s, the serials were like, Flash Gordon, Superman, Batman back in their early days, and Batman before became like, a superhero vigilante. He was a detective. So like he I guess solving crimes every week or whenever the publications came out.
Yeah. Dave Stevens was also inspired by Betty Page, who was the pinup model of the 40s and 50s. And so he designed his character Betty. In the film, it's called Jenny, so they wouldn't have any complications. Yeah. He basically named his character Betty Page in the comics. So
and in the comics, like dead on,
she looks exactly like
comic book version of Betty Page, whereas like Jennifer Connelly is just like, it's just a pretty girl.
She's a brunette. She could be a pinup model at this point in her life. But the other thing is Dave Stevens befriended Betty Page later in her life. He discovered that she lived in his neighborhood. So he found her and said, "Hey, I've been inspired by you. Look, these are the comics that I made for you and everything." And they kind of took care of her in her old age because she was in her 80s at that point.
Yeah, she had a pretty rough after her modeling career. Like, I think she chose to end it.
I think so. Yeah.
She lived out the rest of her days pretty modestly. She became a diner waitress.
At one point,
Yeah, at one point she married a Christian dude and was like really into God and like retired in Florida.
Newborn Christian.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were Florida. Maybe later.
Yeah,
Florida,
later in her life, I think she retired in Florida or was there for a while.
You know, I don't know where Dave Stevens lived at the time. It didn't say when I found that out.
Yeah.
But I had assumed
Right.
California because all this was California.
That's what. Yeah, Dave Stevens playing the long game.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, they're friends, and so he made sure her name wasn't misconstrued or anything. But
because I think she also like put that behind her, like she was over her pinup days and like
because of the newborn Christianity. They did actually. Dave unfortunately passed away pretty young. He was only 54. He had a hairy sickle cell carcinoma. I think it was a very rare cancer. And I bring this up because I remember at the time, everybody across the comics industry was like, we got to promote, trying to get GoFundMe's and stuff when that first appeared. Because I think it was back in 2014 he passed away, to promote trying to find a cure for that. And so I'd at least say, like, if you ever donate, that would be in honor of this film even. And Betty actually passed away like 3 months later, just of old age. So it's interesting that they both went around the same time, even if he was a little younger. But either way, he was there for the making of this film. And the two screenwriters were Paul DeMeo and I believe Danny Bilson. He is actually the father of Rachel Bilson, who you might know as Summer from the OC.
What?
Yeah, there it is, Danny Bilson. So if anyone liked the OC, apparently you can kind of thank it for the Rocketeer in a certain way.
From a certain point of view.
Yeah. Not that this made any money for Danny Bilson, but he's apparently been a professor for decades at USC. So if we had gone to USC, we might have met the guy who wrote Rocketeer. That would have been pretty big.
Hey
I
man,
guess.
you're
Missed
the guy who
opportunity.
wrote the Rocketeer. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll have a good day.
Yeah, right. Well, he could have taught us screenwriting, is what
Yeah,
I'm
right.
assuming he does there. You know.
This is yeah.
But yeah, the film is, like Jeff said, very much like Indiana Jones in a sense that it has that flair for adventure. There's a nightclub like Temple of Doom that they have a set piece in. There's
Same campy
there's
sense of humor.
Nazis
Yeah,
eventually.
Nazis, yeah.
Nazi Zeppelin.
Yeah.
It's World War II. There's action, there's adventure, there's Nazis, there's someone stealing something that doesn't belong to them and using it to become the greatest of their time.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at the jetpack. It starts out the film with a chase between feds and mobsters, and the mobsters
as everything happened in the 30s.
Yeah, that's the only thing that was going on. It was just the Depression happened, so everybody stayed home, and then mobs
ruled the streets.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I guess that was the actual outside perception of America too. Like,
probably.
Legitimately, that's how both the Nazis and the Japanese Empire viewed the Americans, like corrupt gangster cowboys that have like no substance to their like whatever their propaganda was spewing out at the time. But like turns out, more of America was like the Rocketeer than they were like gangsters.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that this mob was run by a guy named Eddie Valentine, played by none other than Mr. Paul Sorvino.
We mentioned a couple months ago in the December episode because Goodfellas came out then.
Yeah.
So he's
lips man.
He keeps coming back. He's a recurring guest on this show.
Yeah, he was on Dick Tracy. We talked about him there. So and those are the two films he did before this. He's definitely just been a gangster in 3 straight films.
Weirdly enough, there's a henchman in this that kind of looks like he's right out of Dick Tracy.
Right.
That's why I'm like, do they use the same makeup?
Right.
Yeah.
Dick
Was
Tracy.
Rick Baker on Dick Tracy? Because I'm pretty sure this was a Rick Baker.
Nah, I don't think that was Rick Baker on that one.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't
Well,
look that up because I
The
did think.
guy listed for the person who played Lothar in the credits is listed as Tiny Ron.
Mhm.
Wonder why.
He was a basketball player who, finding out that there was another basketball player or someone else, I think maybe an actor named Ron Taylor, when he started getting into acting, named himself Tiny Ron to be ironic.
Well, okay then.
Yep.
The more you know.
Tiny Zeus Lister.
He actually looks, I found pictures of him. He looks like a pretty handsome blonde, like just plain dude, just happened to be 7 feet tall. And
Just slap a lot of prosthetics on
Yeah.
his face to make him look monstrous.
and that does
Kind of like what they
it's
did
how
with the guy
Lothar
who
looks in the
played
comics.
Chunk in the Goonies, because he was a football player. And they put all the prosthetics on him. So they
I
get
know.
the physical type and then just build on top of them the prosthetics.
Right. Yeah. So his impending, or what's the word? Is it
Imposing.
imposing frame?
Impending.
Yeah. Well, the guy that died, it was
He's
obvious
coming
that
into
it
the
happened.
frame. He's tending it.
Yeah.
All right.
His imposing frame was clearly all him.
Right. And he wasn't just running on stilts.
Right.
All right. So it opens with Feds versus Mobsters.
Yes. I was gonna say, this is where the rocket pack comes in. They are trying to steal it from Howard Hughes so they can give it off to the Nazis. The Nazis have hired them to.
But they don't know.
But they
that.
don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They just know like we got hired to steal something. That's what we do.
Yeah, there's a Nazi agent that's trying to get Eddie Valentine to procure this for them. So the feds get the better of the gangsters. They get shut up, and in a lull in the chase, one that's surviving at the time hides the rocket pack in a hangar that he's driving through, which happens to be Cliff Secord's hangar. It's not his personally, but that's where he flies out of.
It's the hangar.
John Pluto, I mentioned, is the guy who owns it.
Yeah, they're renting it for use.
Yeah,
Alan
and-
Arkin.
yeah. Alan Arkin is the mechanic for the place, and they're kind of a team together that usually are. They've been working on a plane that they can impress the people at these shows that they can also race in. They'll make their money from this, and they've been working for years on this test plane to try and finally recoup everything. And in that chase, the feds actually shoot up, or I think it's
No, it was
it's
the gangsters. The gangsters
gangster
shot at
shoots
him.
And I would assume, they don't say it, but the gangster probably assumes that the plane is in on the chase.
Yeah.
So he's kind of innocent in that, yeah, I'd shoot at something going after me,
Yes.
but the plane happens to hover over the chase.
He's just a
But
trigger.
they're
happy
driving through
guy.
his airfield. Like this is where he's like,
Yeah.
piloting essentially.
Yeah. So they mess up the plane and ruin it because it ends up crash landing.
Yeah. Well, crash landing into them.
Into a
Yeah.
gas truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and into a gas truck.
The first of 2 times things crash into gas trucks that just happen to be there. I don't know if that was a rampant
That
issue.
sparked.
I mean, I feel like that might have been
They said
foreshadowing for
Zeppelin
the
at the end
the
because
Zeppelin
Like,
later because like
literally
it's essentially a giant
gas
gas
tank.
tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the sky.
Yeah.
Except it's using literal gas instead of gasoline.
Right. That is kind of funny. I'm sure that was a thing where you didn't really have gas stations and you had to have a gas truck on site at hangars at least all the time.
Yeah, well, you can't exactly
well,
pull up
yeah,
a stunt plane to a gas station anyway, so they had to
Right.
have their own.
Yeah, you had to
dudes on
drive
there.
the gas to the plane.
I don't know what I would think of. You bring like a container or something. I don't know. Anyway, Cliff and
A lot of explosions.
yeah, Cliff and PV's Alan Arkin.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so Cliff's got this father figure
brown looking.
mechanic who, like,
Okay.
he flies the plane, and Alan Arkin, in one of his best roles, plays the mechanic / father figure that fixes everything.
I will admit, I always forgot that Alan Arkin was in this. And even though I shouldn't, I love Alan Arkin in this. And when he won his Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine, I was like, who is this guy? Why is he getting an Oscar for his career? I don't know him. I hadn't seen Catch-22 at that point, which is one of his other best roles.
Or the
He is pretty good in Little Miss Sunshine in hindsight 15 years later, but
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
looked so young in this. I mean, I most recently saw him in I'm watching the Kaminsky Method,
Mm-hmm.
where he's like literally just
Great.
supposed to be an aging actor or an aging
Yeah.
Hollywood
He
guy.
always looked this old though.
Yeah. Well, he's
I know,
85.
but he
You
looked
know
that
what it
old with
is?
hair.
It's
Everyone
the
had hair
mop
back
on his
then.
head. Yeah. He
He-
definitely didn't have hair like that.
Oh, you know what's funny?
Ontario Quinn.
Now that we're talking about like seeing actors like far apart in separate movies, the guy that plays the Rocketeer,
Billy Campbell.
Yeah, I had only seen him in the Rocketeer as a kid. Next movie I see him
It
in,
doesn't go that far.
no, it doesn't, because the next movie I see him in, he's beating up Jennifer Lopez as
Oh,
a
enough.
former abusive
That's probably
Enough.
husband or
second
boyfriend.
movie's
biggest.
horrible.
So like,
Yeah.
knowing that he was in the Rocketeer, and then like years later in my teens, seeing him beat up Jennifer Lopez, I'm just like, huh?
Yeah.
Like he went from good guy to bad guy. Like
10 years
They
later.
look the same in that movie too.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
I don't know if Corey said the name, but Enough is the film.
Enough,
there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. I never saw that, but I knew
Yeah.
that he was in it. I just never got around to seeing it. He was also a few years after that, actually 10 years after that, he was in a show called The Killing, which came from a Norwegian program. They adapted it for AMC, and he plays the most likely suspect in a killing in town. It's a small town up north somewhere, like Washington or Maine or something.
Not Norway.
Well, obviously it is in the original, but he's a mayoral candidate that could have gained from the killing. I only watched the first 3 episodes. He's very sinister. He's having an affair with someone in the town, so there's motive. I don't know if he's the actual killer, and I keep meaning to go back and finish the first season to find out if the Rocketeer is the murderer. But he's probably the least likely, since they're making him seem like the most likely.
He's the red herring.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I was guessing back then that he was the red herring. So, but those are the 3 big things he ever did.
Well, he almost didn't even get the role.
Sure, he was the unknown that Joe Johnston and Dave Stevens pushed for, and they wanted to go with. Do you have a list?
Apparently, Disney favored Johnny Depp was the favorite.
Really?
Which at the time I'd be fine with.
Yeah, but they were also talking to Dennis Quaid, Kurt Russell, Bill Paxton, and Emilio Estevez. Vincent D'Onofrio was offered it and turned it down.
I would have loved
So
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, either him or like who else was on the list?
Dennis Quaid, Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell would have been fine.
I would have said Dennis Quaid. He would have been a.
And at the time, he got a little. He aged a little bit by the time like Parent Trap comes around a few years later. So he's definitely in the dad role by then. I don't know if he's a little too old in 91, but
I mean, Parent Trap was like 98, 99.
yeah, 7 years later.
Yeah,
So he probably would have been.
40.
He probably still would have looked
he
young.
was doing DOA around this time, so
Yeah.
it was
He's still in his
around
30s.
time.
I mean, Billy Campbell was 31 when he made this. So.
And you know what? No. If they had made a Flash Gordon, well, no, they did make a Flash Gordon movie in the 80s. Didn't
They
they?
did
With the main villain of
If
this.
they made a Flash Gordon movie more like in the style of the Rocketeer, Dennis Quaid would have been perfect.
Yeah, I think he'd be better than that.
Yeah.
I think he fits that. Emilio has that flop hair. Billy Campbell actually got a haircut based on the comic for his audition.
And that's why I got the part.
Yeah, I think he walked in there and they're like, "That's my guy. I drew him." So
He fooled them all.
yeah, I think he does a good job.
Yeah,
He's
he does
charming.
nice. Yeah.
He
I need to
definitely.
be the dissenting opinion.
It's a shame that he hasn't
Yeah.
really done too much in the 30 years since. But
What do you think, Corey?
What's weird is because it's almost essentially the same role as Steve Rogers in a way, but
Yeah.
something about the way Chris Evans is square is more charming. I feel like Billy Campbell comes off very vanilla and reluctant most of the time.
Yeah.
He just
I can
doesn't
see
have
that.
that panache. He doesn't. I don't know.
he's
I
still
get
just like
that.
a cocky, 1930s stunt pilot that just wants to like live his life and then accidentally, becomes a.
I feel like he's so
Shot
unwitting
second.
throughout the whole movie. Like he doesn't want to participate in any of it.
That is how the character's written in the comics.
Right.
So at least the originals, there was an update after Dave passed away where other artists started taking over to honor his memory. And I think proceeds initially went to that sickle cell or Harry sickle cell program. So the character got a little more patriotic, or at least a little bolder in these updates. So I think I like his performance because of nostalgia mostly, but I see what you're saying about like Jennifer Connelly is a little more
Honestly, everybody else is so much more colorful than him and I know his role is to be colorless for the most part. But he just gets completely overshadowed by the main villain, Timothy Dalton, who's basically playing Errol Flynn. And honestly, he would have been great for that Errol Flynn biopic that they did a few years ago.
Kevin Kline.
Well, I guess like they kind of had to make him a little more vanilla if you're gonna want to make him feel like an ordinary like everyman's guy.
I think that's all it is.
Yeah. Like he's like the common guy, like simple ambitions. He wants to be a pilot, blah blah blah.
And who would you want to root for? The famous movie star who you don't realize is a Nazi, or the guy who actually you could be if you put this rocket pack on? You know.
And this is before
every blue collar guy's dream.
Yeah.
But Timothy Dalton though steals the movie in my
opinion. He certainly does.
He is
much like his
he's a good villain.
I wanted to see I almost want to see that movie within a movie. Where they're introducing where he's shooting that swashbuckling.
The weird Musketeer movie.
Where he has mango in hair.
Yeah.
But one of the
perfect because he played James Bond once.
Yeah, well, he's coming out with his 2 Bond films.
So like he has to play a villain.
Which
he's my favorite Bond.
They reference that because he says the line like when they're fighting in the Zeppelin. He says the line, they're like, "Where's your stuntman now?" And he's like, "I do my own stunts."
Yeah.
Which was a reference to the fact that as James Bond, he was like the only Bond actor to do his own stunts.
And you could tell.
That I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Daniel Craig eventually did. Obviously, at the time, he was the one.
Right.
But,
yeah.
You know, that's semantics. He is obviously Errol Flynn, and an interesting point on that is that when they wrote this, everyone kind of was under the assumption in the same way that Lindbergh was clearly a Hitler fan. Errol Flynn was a secret Nazi, and there was no way to dispute it because he had passed away. And a few years later, a book comes out having clear evidence that Errol Flynn wasn't a Nazi at all, or a spy in any way.
Yeah.
If anything, he was more similar to Lindbergh, where he might have been a fan of the country and then they also happen to become Nazis, we're not 100% sure, but he's not as flagrant as Timothy Dalton's Nazi was. He didn't have like a secret enigma machine to pass on information, get a rocket back,
I think that's actually the coolest bit of trivia was the production got their hands on an actual enigma machine for code accuracy when they were like they when he sent a secret message to the Nazis, they got an actual enigma machine so they can code it the right way. But then they cut that bit for time.
Yeah, so that's why you never saw it.
So I'm going to spring this up now because I brought it up to you before.
Yeah.
Because like the James Bond thing just reminded me of another thing about the pistol Timothy Dalton uses.
Is your favorite thing?
Yeah.
That's right. He's the firearms guy.
Yeah, the firearms guy. He's using a Walther P38 pistol, which
and the final scene at Griffith Observatory is the one he holds on Jenny.
Yeah, he doesn't. That gun doesn't go into production until 1939. This movie takes place in 38. So he himself is carrying a prototype weapon, while the Rocketeer is wearing a prototype weapon. Also, back to me like remembering that he was James Bond because I completely forgot. The Walther P38, or at least a model along the Walther production, was the first gun that James Bond used in any film. Was that gun? So
that's how he got his stats.
It's very appropriate. I'm sure the art directors knew which one to use for Neville Sinclair because they knew it was Bond by the time they probably made that or procured them.
I guess because he was such a good villain, I just forgot he was Bond.
Right. Like this is what I like him better for. I like his Bond films. I think he's underrated.
Bond.
Wasn't he only in 2 Bond films?
Yeah, 4 Year Old, not 4 years only. License to Kill and
Living Daylights.
Yes, Living Daylights. I like Living Daylights better even.
I never seen any of his Bond films. which is weird.
We should watch them. Yeah, they're very.
Actually, he has a perfect track record as Bond because he's only done 2, so he didn't have time to do younger ones.
That's I think why Lazenby's a little underrated because his is good.
Right,
but it's the only one he did
better ones. But he didn't have time to screw it up like some of the Roger Moore ones.
Right. You can forgive Roger Moore because of the quantity.
Right.
And Timothy Dalton for the quality.
Good outweighs the bad. Same thing with Connery.
Yeah, with Brosnan and Craig, they have 5.
Brosnan.
Yeah.
And it might be that way with Craig. We don't know. We're never going to know.
So we'll do a James Bond analysis one day.
No Time to Die.
We'll
yeah, I think Timothy Dalton's usually the best part of the film. Though this
and the art direction.
Yeah, well, everything is spot on. I mean, Joe Johnston comes from an art background. He did paintings on the Star Wars trilogy. He's the person that created Boba Fett. He's the original designer, which is where you see the Rocketeer. It's like he was a match made in heaven for this film.
Okay.
You know what's odd about this?
And you're a fan of Boba Fett.
You never hear about this studio doing this ever. Disney looked at the dailies and they bumped up the production budget from 25 to 35 million. That never happens.
Yeah.
Never happens.
Yeah.
So they must have liked what they saw.
Yeah.
Up to that point.
Yeah, so Joe Johnston, I think he's easily one of my favorite directors. He made a couple of films that I like. I know you're not a huge fan of it, but he did Jumanji. Corey. Yeah, Corey hates Jumanji. But yeah, I think realizing this, I always kind of forget that he did that, or at least I did when we were rewatching this, and I was going over his filmography. It has the same kind of flair. The music's a little bit similar. James Horner is the person that provides the music for this. I saw an interesting trivia that a lot of what he used in this, he kind of rehashed for Titanic. So the upswell when he gets the rocket pack is kind of the first time you see the boat in Titanic, which I don't have a problem with. I don't care if you're reusing your own music, John Williams.
I was going to say, John Williams does it all the time.
Yeah. And
Danny Elfman.
As this was going on, I was like, this is maybe my favorite part, James Horner's music. I completely forgot how fun it is. And I think that makes him more exciting if he's being vanilla, you know? So, but anyway, back to Joe Johnston. I wanted to sidetrack to that and not forget James Horner.
He's good at intermingling big special effects and set pieces with smaller character moments.
Mm-hmm.
Even in stuff like that clearly didn't have a coherent script at the time, like Jurassic Park 3. There's parts where Sam Neill can shine.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra Nivola has stuff to do.
Yeah, the pterodactyls are exciting. Whereas in the book, it was a nice scene, but he actually fleshes that out in a coherent way. Yeah. So I think, what was the 4th film that I liked him for? He did. Oh, well, Captain America, of course. October Sky, it's a smaller piece. It fits in with these other ones pretty easily. So he's had a decent career. He kind of faded off after Captain America. It was like one last hurrah, yeah. Unfortunately. He could pop in again. He's supposed to make the reboot that's coming to Disney Plus of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which I don't know if is ill-advised given this Turner and Hooch show that just came out, but
I mean, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, like they had a TV series for a long time. So like, and it was cheesy as hell, but like it still did well. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe like a new series.
I think it'll be fun. It's just a movie.
Oh, just a movie?
Yeah,
then,
just called Shrunk, but Josh Gad is going to be in it as the Rick Moranis. And
Rick Moranis is coming back, so that's one glimmer of hope.
Yeah. And obviously he worked with Joe Johnston on the original, so maybe there's some chemistry there that they can recapture. So I think just the fact that Rick's coming back is what's going to help.
Yeah.
So, trying to think who else we haven't talked about.
We should talk about Terry O'Quinn.
Yes.
I
didn't realize for the longest time. I rewatched this for the first time in like 10 years after The Aviator came out. So now I have the whole backstory of Howard Hughes.
There you go. Speak.
in the back of my head. So seeing Terry O'Quinn play him, I don't know. I think he might have done a little better than Leo.
He looks a lot more like him. He's more of a doppelganger.
It was a lot less
I was
depressing, too.
distracted by the fact that he wasn't conversing with him while peeing in a Mason's jar. So it
Sure.
didn't be accurate.
It's still like 40 years away from being a CD, but
I mean, wasn't he insane by that point? Or
we didn't know.
yeah, he had it under wraps.
According to the sources, he had tendencies, but it wasn't.
Yeah, he was a little too happy-go-lucky with the handshaking and shoulder touching to be a real
right.
Sure, yeah.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
But it is cool
They
when
didn't know.
people like historical figures into fiction like this.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was a couple actors that they threw in there too, like prominent actors of that era.
W.C. Fields and
Yeah.
Clark Gable show up at the
Yeah.
nightclub
That
when
was
Neville takes Jenny out to dinner. There was another.
That's one of the tensest scenes in the movie. And there's not action going on.
Yeah, that was a neat trick that he does with the paper in the soup.
Yeah. Well,
Cliff knows that Neville is a Nazi by this point when they get to the place, and he slips a piece of paper into soup and pretends to be a waiter giving the two of them soup. And so she sees the message, you got to get out of here. And it sinks or rises to the top. So Neville actually knows, and there's no dialogue for that. It's all in his performance, like, oh, I've been made.
yeah.
Right.
I gotta,
Like he's on to me.
yeah, it's a good little trick, I think.
Yeah, it's like everything in that nightclub scene, like all the problems that they were like having just like came together right there.
Yeah.
Because like Cliff was being chased by the gangsters, and the gangsters were also trying to track down Jenny, because like they don't know the identity of the Rocketeer. They're going based on what little leads that they have, and like it's just like this whole like basically a wild goose chase.
Yeah, because Cliff's right under the nose. I actually like that because the way they set this up, it's not obvious. We know everything as it's going on, but it's fun watching the gangsters all figure out, hey, this is the girl we've been looking for. We got to find that girl's boyfriend. And they go down. That's another little trick where they go down the wall of pictures and they're like, hey, she's standing next to you. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
We got to get you.
It's like it all comes together.
And he almost said
guys have the edge over the good guys. And like,
yeah,
it's a great scene.
So, yeah, I think
I don't know. I love it because it's wholesome, but not campy. I remember seeing this film like once as a kid, and I was 3-ish when it came out. So I watched it like a little bit later, and I remember loving it and watching it again. You know, when we're watching these movies that were meant for kids later on in life, a lot of it seems really cheesy and like over the top and campy. But this didn't feel that way at all. Like it felt like I was watching Indiana Jones with a jetpack. Like it still holds up as a really good movie.
Yeah. I credit that to the writers.
You can tell that like I didn't know the whole Joe Johnson connection. That he was, because watching this after seeing Marvel develop their universe for the last 12 years, you know, you can see how much they borrowed from this movie. Like almost every flying shot was replicated with Iron Man later on, and all of these, you know, these characters that show up and they're interacting with like real life people. And
yep, Howard Hughes is essentially what's his name's father?
Howard Stark. Yeah,
Howard Stark.
But yeah, I mean, it's a landmark movie, not just for Disney.
He's fighting Hydra, for Christ's sakes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, imagine if this film comes out 10 years later. Would this have launched off a different type of comics revolution than X-Men did? Or
I feel like this
it would have done better at the box office too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the special effects.
It's kind of a cult movie.
Fair enough.
Yeah, either way, it led to the comic revolution we know, because I think people had this in the back of their mind. They were hungry for something like X-Men because of stuff like Rocketeer, Shadow, and Dick Tracy.
And the Phantom.
Yeah, and
Yeah, like all
I always
those,
forget that because I didn't see it.
And
all those
like I guess like
era superhero movies just all kind of came out around the same time.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Batman had just happened,
Right.
and Superman a few years earlier. But it was like you couldn't touch anything that wasn't the two of them. You couldn't do Marvel, they thought, because they tried the campy Captain America and the Fantastic Four.
I think
they
that
thought
I think
it was
there
just a waste. There was more
Fantastic Four
audience or money to put into these kind of things. I think it would have been nice to have it be more successful. They wanted to do a trilogy, but I actually kind of like it's in a similar way. One of my favorite shows is Firefly, and they always talk about what they would have done in a second season if they'd gotten that, but it's almost perfect because it's only 13 episodes. You don't get the down swing like we were just saying with Timothy Dalton. His 2 Bond films are good because he didn't have a chance to ruin his credibility.
Or the writers ruin it,
or something go wrong in production.
Yeah.
So imagine a sequel happens and it's just not as good. Maybe Jennifer Connelly she's only signed on for 2, so maybe they kill her off in the second one, which would have been a total waste and incorrect maneuver.
Or make it big as a movie star,
right.
And like he has to find another girlfriend.
Yeah, or everyone asked for too much money, so they're like, Billy Campbell's asking for too much money. Who the hell is this? Let's just recast him. He's in a helmet anyway. Who knows what would happen?
I feel like
now
nowadays
they're talking about a sequel.
It would probably be more like the what Marvel's doing with their television things. Like this would have been more of a Falcon and the Winter Soldier type setup.
I wouldn't mind a show like that now.
Yeah, which incidentally there is a TV show, but it's meant for children, like 5-year-olds.
Which is similar to the Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. It's animated, it's computer generated. It's supposed to be like for 3 to 5-year-olds, but I haven't checked it out yet.
I feel like Camp Cretaceous is more for like 7 to 10.
Yeah.
with the amount of violence that they have in it, and like that might be for a little older than.
Yeah. Luckily, it is still a quality kids show.
Because legitimately, I remember seeing Jurassic Park in theaters, and like everything was for the most part okay up until like the Velociraptor attacks Ellie Sattler in the generator room. Then me and my baby sister lost our shit because that was so scary.
She's probably too young for that.
Oh yeah, no, like
you're 5 at that point.
Yeah, I'm 5 at that point. But like after that scared the crap out of me. Like I was in love with that movie. It's like dinosaurs can be badass.
I will mention this later in our series, but Beauty and the Beast comes out in December. And I was so scared of Belle being chased by the wolves. I like hid in my dad's chest and everything, like freaking out. This marveled at. Like I was on the edge of my seat. So my parents knew that it was just the shadows that would scare me. Like I was fine. But I did want to mention that I didn't stop quoting for a long time when Cliff first does his flight and lands in the bog. And he takes the helmet off and he's like, I like it. I would run around my house and quote that to my parents all the time. So I have to point out that I was obsessed with this movie as a kid.
Nice. Hang on.
Always doing that. All right. I guess, do you guys have any grades on this? Is there anything else
how do we feel since they are talking about doing a belated sequel? Where do we think they go with this? In this current zeitgeist, what would we want to see? What would you want to see?
I know in the cartoon, the plot of it is that it's his great granddaughter. Her grandfather is around. He's dead, Cliff Secord.
So it's a soft legacy sequel.
Yeah,
I think they tie it into Marvel somehow. Marvel will buy the rights.
That's probably what they would do. But it takes
Disney
place.
Owns them.
So the Cold War is going on. Her father and grandfather are there. And you get allusions to Cliff and Jenny without having to like go upon what they actually did. I do know Billy Campbell popped up in an episode to do they see an old newsreel of the Rocketeer and he talks in it. So they could get him back for a voice thing if they did an animated series, I'm sure.
I feel like an animated series would be like good if they went in the direction of like the Star Wars animated series.
Like the Bad Batch right now.
Oh yeah, because like they have a perfect
just ended today.
perfect reference to work from, because they already have flying animated characters with jetpacks, Mandalorians.
Right, which is Joe Johnson's legacy.
Because like with the live action show of the Mandalorian, they didn't start having him like fly till the tail end of the first season, and like when they have him fly in the second season, it's just like him just zooming through the sky.
Yeah.
But like you look in the animated series for like the Clone Wars or Rebels or anything with like anybody with jetpacks, like, they do some pretty cool like maneuvers, because you know they're animated. You don't have to have like this weird clunky person that's live action and try to make them still look live action, but you have to animate them because they're flying.
You don't have to have paid
like consistent animation throughout. So like you have a little more freedom to do more aerial acrobatics.
I also feel like this would definitely lend itself to being I mean the 3D like Clone Wars animation would be good, but I feel like they also have an opportunity to take it backwards a different step, and make it more like the cartoons of the 30s, and just kind of like like the old school Superman cartoon.
Oh, like the Fleischer Studios
right,
Superman?
exactly, like the Fleischer Studios Superman, but you know, with whatever modern twists they wanted to. I feel like that would be really cool, because this movie is, you know, it's a superhero movie, but it's also like an Art Deco piece, and I think
is why I love that kind of style. It's from this movie.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, no. That's probably like because like Art Deco like was a big deal in the Batman animated series.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like that. But I was thinking, although I was thinking this when they're watching the Nazi propaganda film right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And you know, Howard Hughes just pulls up the big TV, and so when they were pitching this, like there was no animation in the rest of the movie, and the animators were just like, hang on, you want us to make what?
Yeah.
This is for the movie, right? This is
you're doing Little Mermaid.
This is not a side project. This is like, can I get this in writing that this is a film within the film? Because I just want to make sure. Because there's just like, you know, giant animated swastikas everywhere. I'm like, oh, this is a Disney film. Cool.
Yep. I wanted to point out that in the footage that Hughes shows them of the test flight that the Germans tried, that test pilot is Dave Stevens. So he got to be Rocketeer. Yeah.
That's amazing.
He dies.
Yeah. He's the one that blows up. I was thinking, as Jimmy was mentioning, what he thought an animated show could look like. I never really thought about this, but a couple episodes ago, you asked, what would you do if you were given a blank check to do something for Disney or a sequel or something? And Corey was like, you're going to do a sequel to Rocketeer. That's what you would want. I don't remember what episode that was on we were talking about. Maybe Rescuers Down Under, because I think we were saying, like, what would you want to do if you had the chance? And I was like, Rescuer sequel. So I'm trying to think what I would do. I feel like today, with this cynical take that they always do in these films,
I don't want it gritty.
I know. The way I went straight up was not even to cast Billy Campbell again or anything, but you could have it post-war. What does a Rocketeer look like? I feel like that's too cynical, because it's a nice level that America gets to right after the war, and then the Korean War takes off, and there's a little bit of cynicism there. I don't know that I'd want to see a Rocketeer from the 50s or 60s, especially because by then he's probably 50 himself. So I also don't know that they'd want to just do a straight up World War II Rocketeer where he's off fighting Nazis, because that's basically Captain America, the first soldier or whatever.
Yeah.
The first Avenger. So what would you do with a direct sequel? I don't know. I think a series would be better, but maybe going back and forth with a legacy. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, I don't actually. If Disney were to do a sequel to the Rocketeer and have it take place during the Second World War, I feel like it might come off a little
reductive.
Not reductive, but like not like underpowered.
Yeah,
because
too
it's like
easy.
what the thing is, like what they did with the Marvel movies, especially with Captain America. Captain America was fighting the Nazis, but then they were like, no, he's fighting Hydra.
Right, they are there. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've seen enough films of Nazis that of World War II in general that we wouldn't be seeing anything new.
Yeah, well, there's that, but then also like I guess for Captain America and then eventually the Avengers, like they kind of have to, like in real world, like real world history, like after the Nazis lost, they kind of just they had no relevance in the world theater anymore. There's just like a bunch of like neo-Nazi skinhead motherfuckers like scattered throughout the world, but like who's Captain America going to fight? So they came
that's
up with,
why they pushed
yeah,
it forward.
so like they had to come up with the Hydra to fight throughout the rest of the other decades after the Second
in the
World War.
comics.
In the comics.
Yeah.
So like it makes sense, partly one for Marvel / Disney to do that, but like it kind of feels muted, historically speaking, because like they're not fighting like the bad guys that we're familiar with. So like,
but it's,
I wonder if Disney / Marvel like made a sequel to the Rocketeer, like especially during the war, like how much of it would they
Disney-fy
tone down,
or
even
it would be much of the same where there are gangsters again. Oh yeah, he's fighting a Nazi who has either a spy or right up there in his face.
And
it's not going to be that much.
And most World War II movies, like sure, the Japanese were also the villains, but you don't really see them that often as villains.
But I also don't know if you want
cinema.
him over the Pacific Ocean or anything.
The other thing,
Mishima, I don't know about that.
The other thing to remember though is, like, we remember the Rocketeer as fighting Nazis. The only fighting that happened was he threw a punch at Neville Sinclair in the Zeppelin.
He punches a federal agent twice as much.
Yeah. Okay, right. That's the thing. Like, he's not a fighter, he's a flyer. And I think that would be an interesting way to go too, where it's less like going in guns blazing like Iron Man and more of a stealth mentality.
That's the idea. We start with him as a pilot in the Air Force. He's overseas as Cliff Secord, and at night he goes on stealth missions to recover information. The way he escapes is by flying out of Nazi camps. Sometimes he gets into too much skirmishes. Secord, you're too public. Then they can't know that we're in Germany already. That kind of thing.
Dear Disney, please hire us.
Because like he would like even he would be great for like recon.
That's it. It's a recon kind of person, not a in your face punching.
Because like back then, like how's a guy with a rocket pack gonna stand up against like a whole army of dudes on the ground with like guns, flamethrowers, tanks. Rockets, tanks.
His entire superpower is running really fast.
He might have an edge over like all the flying vehicles in the sky because he could go zoomies way faster.
Yeah, he can salute a Nazi pilot or something as he flies by.
But like what is he armed with? He, like in the comics, he's armed with a pistol.
Yeah, which he loses immediately on the set.
Yeah, like his iconic pistol, he barely has for a minute in the movie.
Yeah.
Which is also the same iconic pistol that's the foundation for Han Solo's gun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, we gotta have a whole analysis on all these weapons, Jimmy. But yeah, and I mean, going back to the cartoon discussion, I think what I was trying to say was Batman the Animated Series, but during the day.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Like, that'd be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry, back to...
No, I think I'm good on this recon idea. I kind of want to walk up writing it.
Back script.
Yep. Oh boy. We didn't really hit on Jennifer Connelly too much. I've heard
the damsel in distress.
Well, that's actually a point. Paul DeMeo and Danny Bilson tried to make sure she wasn't a damsel in distress. And so as much as they can, they tried to make her have her own confidence and everything.
Yeah. I mean, she puts her dukes up when she has to, though.
She's the one that doesn't she shoot someone on the Zeppelin, or she's the one.
She shoots the flare.
She's the only one that kills a Nazi.
She almost blows up everybody.
Yeah, she like kicks one of them out the window. I'm like,
Yeah.
She actually technically kills a couple because like the guy, the big brutish guy, he's tied down. He's tied by a chain to the top of the Zeppelin, so he doesn't fall off. But as the Zeppelin's blowing up, he's still tied to it.
Yep.
Jenny Blake has a higher body count than the Nazis.
Too.
Yeah, she's the real hero.
Yeah.
So
she has a higher kill count than the Rocketeer.
Yeah.
So then we do an Ant-Man and the Wasp situation where she becomes the Rocketeer.
They've hinted at that in some of the comics. Like she wants to get in on it, and he's like, "You're not a pilot."
Oh, I've seen some
women.
I've seen one pinup art where she's the Rocketeer, and like that might look a little sexy. Not gonna lie.
That's what they kept telling me to get as a tattoo, like Jenny on my arm as like a pinup model. I'm like, that was my first tattoo. I don't know.
What are you, Popeye?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not. So I got the
the actual silhouette. Rocketeer.
So clearly I love this film. This is obviously one of my, I don't know if it's top 10. I'm sure it's up there close by. The nostalgia factor is clearly evident, mostly because it's my first big screen experience, but obviously I'd give it an A+. So
solid A.
Also an A. For
I know you're going to dissent, Corey. I see you shifting your eyes.
Yeah, I'm going to go B- only for the fact that I think Billy Campbell really is like, he's an albatross around the movie's neck. But kind of, you know what's weird? I was wondering why I didn't find the action scenes as exciting as everyone else. And I think Jeff hit upon something. I'm so used to mono fist fights with the hero and the villain. The fact that he just he averts all that by flying away. I'm just like, I want some catharsis out of this. I want him to fight back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what Jeff said is probably one of the reasons why I don't like it.
Maybe he's too much of a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't hit a person.
He's a pacifist with a jetpack. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, he'll hit the feds, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This is special films to me. But,
not exactly a hidden gem, but still.
Well,
it didn't do well in theaters.
It came in fourth the first weekend and kind of disappeared almost immediately. So it barely recouped its money.
Yeah.
It is kind of a cult classic these days because of that.
Yeah, because like growing up, I remember
it only made 46 million total.
Yeah. Growing up, most kids I knew were obsessed with Batman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers. Like there's so many other like hero figures that we're just obsessed over, and like Rocketeer was kind of just in the background.
Yeah, and it kind of came and went pretty quickly. It's gone by, I said it came out June 24th. It's gone by the middle of July. So it was barely out for the 4th of July weekend. You had Terminator 2 dominating the box office, so you couldn't.
Yeah, no, it just couldn't compete with like the other movies that were coming out.
Yeah,